Here is a motion picture film. Let's tidy up this tangle of film by putting it on a reel.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Film Swap. My name is David Seeley, and I'd like to introduce you to my esteemed co-host, a man who has never in his life returned an overdue library book. And I'm surprised they've never come after them. He's the ecstatic gaucho himself, and his name is Jonathan Pritchard Barrett. Jonathan, how are you today?
I'm not bad, thank you very much. Yep,
Yeah.
well.
Oh, well, that was convincing, Jonathan. That was just yeah, I'm all right.
Sorry, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm rather tired. That's the only problem. But
Oh dear, perfect for podcasting, really.
Perfect for podcasting. So I'm going to be a bit more chilled than normal.
Oh well, that's okay. Because I think one of our films anyway tonight is so kind of wild and crazy that we probably need to counteract that a little bit and be a bit more chilled, don't you think?
Yes, and the other film I would say features a character who's rather sort of jaded, sort of metaphysically tired, you might say.
Yes, I think that sums it up very well. So perhaps you can take on that caricature yourself tonight. That sort of, you can channel that energy.
Yeah, I don't have quite the same sideburns as
No. Well, there's perhaps by the end of the show they'll grow in a bit. But
yes, that's true.
But anyway, listeners, tonight we are talking as usual about a couple of really, really great films, very interesting films that we'd like to put forward and recommend tonight. Our theme is great adaptations. And what we're doing is we're going to the library and we're dusting off a couple of old volumes, old tomes, and we're looking at some great film adaptations of classic literature. That was basically the remit going in, and we've each picked films and put them forward based around that theme tonight. So, Jonathan, just at a very high level, in the second half of the show, we're going to be talking about your film, which is one of the all-time great classics of the cinema, and I'm really looking forward to diving in and having a conversation about it. But Jonathan, if you want to just very briefly introduce the second film we'll be talking about tonight.
My film is called The Leopard, or it's actually an Italian film, Il Gatto Pardo, I hope that's how you pronounce it. And it was directed by Luchino Visconti, and I hope that's does his name justice. And it was released in 1963.
Brilliant.
So, should I stop there?
Yeah, I think so, because we'll go into it in more depth. Interestingly enough, because pronunciation is going to be a real challenge, certainly for me tonight. So whenever possible, I'm going to try any way possible to defer to my esteemed co-host to pronounce European names tonight. But in the supplements on the BFI Blu-ray for The Leopard, the lovely Miss Cardinale is Cardinelli. Sorry, oh God, but she pronounces his name Luchino.
Luchino, did she? I did see it, but I must have forgotten that bit. Yeah, I did watch that little.
Yeah. So I don't know if that.
That's what it must be. Luchino.
Well, yeah, because she's Italian, isn't she? So
absolutely.
So I would imagine she would know.
Certain.
So we're going to go with that, but hopefully, listeners, if you want to correct us on that, please, by all means. Anyway, so yes, we'll be talking about The Leopard on the second half of the show tonight as our great adaptations double bill moves forward. But first, we're going to be talking about my film. And this is a really fascinating film that I only just recently kind of discovered. And
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I want to shout it out to the world and tell you to go and dig it out and find it because it's well cool. It's
Yep.
a Czechoslovakian film, and it came out originally in 1988. And hang on a minute, because I looked up how to pronounce his name. The director,
Jan. Maybe Jan.
Jan Švankmajer,
I think that's it. Yep.
is the. I apologize in advance to our listeners out here who know how to pronounce names properly. But I am challenged in that department quite often. So it's a kind of an Americanism, is that I sort of read everything as I think it sounds in sort of, kind of North American English. So I quite often mispronounce names. So my apologies, and whenever possible, I will get Jonathan to say them for me. But anyway, the film is his first feature length film, and it is an adaptation of Alice in Wonderland,
Yeah.
simply called Alice. And it
Yes.
is an absolutely fascinating film. It combines stop motion animation and live action. And rather than the sort of the kind of Disneyfied approach to adapting this story and kind of telling it more in that sort of that kind of style, that Disney style, this film is very, very dark, very mysterious, very grubby, very sort of creepy at times, very very imaginative and just incredibly visually uh, amazing.
Yeah.
And it just is always, it's very surreal and very
Mm.
engrossing and dreamlike in its quality. And I think
It
it's
is.
absolutely fascinating. I just happened to stick it on one night just because I was, kind of being a bit like, I don't know what to watch tonight. And I was just looking through some stuff and I was like, oh, this looks really interesting. I'm going to stick this on. And I was absolutely just totally mesmerized by it and thought it was absolutely fascinating. It is effectively a children's film, but
Yeah.
I think it goes much, much deeper than that because
Yep.
it is very much, it takes more of a kind of a uh, symbolic or kind of psychological approach to the Alice story.
Yes.
Um, just as an overview, the basically the film. I mean, we all know the story of Alice in Wonderland and her little adventure down the rabbit hole,
Yep.
and all the wonderful and strange things she sees down there. But this film sort of takes it up a notch, doesn't it, Jonathan?
Wild.
And it uses stop motion animation with all these sort of weird, kind of like a taxidermied rabbit who kind of comes
Mm.
to life and he eats nails and he bleeds sawdust, which he's
Mm.
constantly sort of licking up and eating to
Mm.
try and replenish his innards.
Yeah.
And Alice follows him on this adventure down into this labyrinth of closed rooms, and the rooms are all kind of grubby and dirty looking, and with a
Mm.
lot of old sort of knickknacks and furniture. And
Yeah.
she is constantly trying to search for keys so that she can get through into the next room. And along the way, she just sees all these just fantastic creatures that are all kind of like they're stuffed animals, sort of teddy bears or other kinds of stuffed animals, and there's other kinds of weird creatures, and it's all done in this kind of hybrid animation style of, as I said, stop motion and live action, because the little girl is a live person, and
Yeah.
she, although at times she'll eat things and then suddenly turn into these incredibly creepy looking dolls, and
Yeah.
and she wanders around, and sometimes she'll grow and become really large and be trapped in a really confined space, and then other times she shrinks really small, and then
Yep.
other times she falls into rivers and then gets pecked at by birds, and so the whole thing has this incredible sort of dark and creepy quality to it, which makes it really mesmerizing and fun to watch.
Yeah.
And I just loved it, and so I that's why tonight I picked it, because I thought, as far as all the adaptations of Alice in Wonderland that have been around through the years, and obviously the most famous one being the Disney animated film, this
Mm.
film takes a completely different tone and a
Yeah.
completely different style, and and it is just fascinating. And it works, even though you might think it's maybe a little bit scary and disturbing in parts and things. I think it also really resonates with kids, because I the second time I watched it just this morning,
Oh yeah.
I watched the English version because it's actually a Czechoslovakian film,
Yeah.
but there is an English dub version that was
Those
released in America, and it's on the
are,
Blu-ray.
okay.
And so the second time I watched it this week, I decided to put on the English one just to see what it was like.
Yeah.
And so my son came in, and he it had already started, but he came in and sat with me and watched it, and he just totally got sucked into it and just
Really?
totally mesmerized by it, and was absolutely really enjoying it as well. So I think this film does really strike a chord with children
Yeah.
as well, just from my observation today.
Yeah.
And I think too, it kind of reminds me a bit of the Studio Ghibli film, My Neighbor Totoro, which
Okay. Yeah.
very much takes on that really intelligent sort of kid's eye view of the world. It really gives you this idea about how kids see the world and how they
Yeah.
see adults and things around them. Sometimes hostile, sometimes imaginative, sometimes surreal, sometimes
Yeah.
all those things. So it kind of reminded me a bit of that, in the sense that this film really gives you that sort of
Yeah.
child's eye perspective on things, and not,
Yeah.
as I said, like a Disney-fied sort of, sugar coated kind of sweet version, but like a real sort of realistic view of how children see authority figures and how they see
Mm.
adults and how they use their imagination and their creativity, and sometimes how things can seem scary,
Yeah.
and sometimes how they can adapt to situations. And so I think this film has many layers to it, and it's really quite
Yes.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, how about you, Jono? What were your was this your first time seeing it?
It's my first time seeing it. I have a box set, the BFI collection of Jan Švankmajer shorts,
Yes.
but which also has, funny enough, another Lewis Carroll story, the Jabberwocky,
Mm.
on it, but it's much shorter. It's sort of 15 minutes or 12 minutes or something like that. Yeah, this is the first time I saw it, and I really liked it. It's very, as you say, very surreal. I guess it's sort of it's very dreamlike. I would say it's like it's sort of got this sort of claustrophobic feeling of a nightmare or a dream, maybe,
Mm.
because he keeps on sort of moving into different rooms and different sort of places, and but she never managed to escape. That somewhere that's sort of um, safe. They're all rather threatening, aren't they?
Yeah, like all the characters to one degree or another are really threatening. And even just the things around her, like part of the dreams that she's hungry, and then some, so she'll see these little bits of food, but even the food's malevolent in some fashion.
Yeah.
Like at one stage she opens up a jam jar and there's nails and screws in it mixed
Yes.
in. And then there's other times that, a character will throw her one of these little tart biscuits, these little sort of
Yes.
crunchy biscuits, and she's hungry and she thinks, oh, this looks nice. She takes a bite and then something horrible happens to her. So
Yes.
it's like everything, even the food and all the surroundings and the animals and everything, have this kind of malevolent, sort of nightmarish quality to them,
Yeah.
that makes it really sort of and yeah, your use of the word claustrophobic is brilliant, because there's these great scenes where, like, there's this constant thing where she goes to open drawers, and every time she tries to open a door or a drawer, the the knob comes off in her hand and she falls
Yes.
back, and then she ends up like sort of getting in and crawling into these really confined spaces to sort of
Yeah.
squeeze through to the next sort of level or section of what's happening. and the animals kind of turn on her. At one point, she's trapped in a house in a
Yeah.
really confined space because she's eaten this thing and it's made her
Yeah.
grow big. So she's stuck in this really confined space. And then all these sort of stuffed animals and toys gather at the bottom of the house and start throwing stones at her and
Yes.
trying to climb up to get at her. And so it does have that quality of kind of menace to it,
Very much.
but in a fun way. Like, we shouldn't sort of make out like the film is like a horror film or anything, but it does have a little sort of sense of that dream kind of,
Yeah.
someone who's having a nightmare, and how things kind of layer on top of each
Yeah.
other and rapidly change to something else. And then, and sometimes it's menacing, and sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's weird, and sometimes it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yes.
So it's a bit like that.
Yeah, I I'd be a bit scared. I mean, maybe my oldest son, I might show it to him, but the other two, I might be a bit worried about showing them in case they had nightmares, because it's pretty sort of out there. But yeah, there's so many good bits in it. Like, there's one bit where these sort of skeleton animals start sort of changing into different skeleton animals and attacking her. And it slightly reminded me of, I don't know if you know the Alan Alberg book Funny Bones, which has got all these sort of skeleton family, basically. But it's sort of because they're skeletons, but they're not that scary, really. But yeah, the white rabbit, though, I mean, this is sort of taxidermied white rabbit. He's really, really creepy with his sort of teeth.
know, I know, and he's constantly like he takes out his watch and it's all covered in his own sawdust, and then he
Yeah,
licks it. He's always there's thing all through it about licking watches, and
yeah,
about and I guess it must just be some sort of symbolism for time or something. But there's constant slobbering over watches and licking them, and at one point
yeah,
there's one character at the Mad Hatter tea party, which
yeah.
is just completely this bizarre thing, which kind of you have to see it to believe it. But this one character is smearing, sort of spreading butter, big thick globs of butter onto the watch, and then licking it
Yes,
off. And it's just very, very sort of strange.
yeah. It's very odd. And the one before we started, I wanted to show you this thing that sort of that the rabbit reminded me of. We got this sort of old, I don't know, very old sort of toy. I don't know if it's Victorian or whatever it is. It's like a cat. I'm going to show it to you now. Look at this.
Yes, yes, he is.
And
He is. That's exactly the kind of thing you would see in the film as well, in the sitting in the background, or at some stage it would sit there, and then a big gloopy tongue would come out of it, and then sort of slobber on her ankle or something.
yeah, it's sort of made of papier mâché. It's actually got, you can see its tongue there.
Yeah,
It's
that's
it's
brilliant for people who are just listening to the podcast. I would urge you to go to our YouTube channel and look at the video version of this, just so you can see Jonathan's little cat
yeah,
there. It's very.
it's not, I would say it's not a real cat. Don't worry. It's sort of old weird toy cat. I may get an email in the next few days from Jan Švankmajer saying, "Could we have it
Yeah, yeah, for the
for a
sequel.
weird film, please?"
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, that would fit right in. One thing that really struck me about that, I mentioned about the grubbiness, because the
Mm,
thing that really strikes you about the kind of the design of the film, the look of the film,
yeah,
everything's old. And
yeah,
even the dress that the girl's wearing is all very rumpled and looks kind of a bit grubby and sort
yeah.
of frayed around the edges. And all the furniture and all of these stuffed toys and dolls have this sort of a bit of grubby, sort of dirty kind of look
Mm,
about them. And even the walls and the paint on the walls and the door frames and all the paint is chipped and everything just looks old and grubby, like this house
yeah,
is some sort of, abandoned place that no one's been in for, sort of 60 years or something. Everything just has that kind of decrepit, kind of sort of aged,
yeah.
quality to it that gives it a really, really interesting sort of visual style to it.
Definitely, yeah. That patina. And there's one bit she gets sort of stuck in a rabbit hutch or something as well, doesn't she?
Yeah,
All these just everyday objects, but they're all given very strange
yeah,
uh, new lives in this film. It's
yeah,
it's really extraordinary, and I sort of yeah yeah just so many strange things. Cakes, clocks, eggs, paper, bread, nails, tins, and a weird can opener,
yeah.
um, biscuits that or cookies that keep on turning up. Which I think from my research, it sounds like they're um, kolak or kolaki, which is a sort of Czech biscuit. Um,
Mm. They
and
look quite nice. They look like they'd go nice with a cup of coffee for sure.
they do look very tasty. Yeah.
but the results of eating them, are perhaps not so appealing.
No. Exactly. I guess
When she turns into a doll, there's a couple times she turns into a doll, and it's like the creepiest looking doll you could ever possibly imagine. Like just this really sort of, the face
yes.
on it and everything. It's like very, very odd.
There's a because that comes from Alice, doesn't it? She has there's a bottle, and it says "Drink me," and it's is that the one that one shrinks her and one
Yeah.
grows her, and uh,
And
uh,
it's all stuff too that, like in real life, if you came across this stuff, you wouldn't stick it in your mouth, would you? But her, for some reason, she finds this little bottle of ink, and she just sort of decides, I think I'll just knock that back, and
yes,
see, and then of course something weird happens. But it's like it's that kind of there's one bit too because she's always trying to find the key to open the next door so she can get into the next room and follow the
yeah,
rabbit. And at one stage, she even like opens up like this old sort of rusty sort of sardine tin, and she has to peel back the top, and then she pulls out the key, and it's all in this kind of slimy sort of kind of olive oily looking sort of substance. But then she sticks it in her mouth to sort of clean it off first before
mm,
she uses it, and you just think, I wouldn't be sticking that in my mouth, love, if I were you. That's pretty gross. But it's all stuff like that which kind of gives it that real sort of dream kind of textures and stuff.
yes, yes, very much. It's I guess another made me think of maybe Kafka, who the also Czech, and his sort of the trial where the sort of protagonist is stuck in this sort of situation they can't understand and can't get out of. And and also sort of British animation like sort of Oliver Postgate Bagpuss. Do you know about that?
Yeah, I remember Bagpuss. Yeah,
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 where they're sort of toys that sort of come alive when the sort of shop's closed. And
yeah,
they're sort of rather sort of Victorian toys as well. It sort of made me think a little bit of that. And the Jabberwocky film actually has a sort of similar some of the similar ideas. These sort of eyes and objects sort of coming alive, dolls' houses again, and yeah, uh, toys sort of dancing around, and sort of you can see that he was sort of almost taking some of the ideas of that film and applying them into Alice in a sort of feature length sort of
yeah.
15
Very
minutes.
much. I think this stylistically is very similar to some of his earlier films, which are quite brilliant as well.
Yeah,
But it is like, yeah, you're right. Like this is sort of like the big version, the big sort of where he's taken all these things he's done and sort of made it into a big sort of feature length sort of
yeah,
story. And
yeah,
I just love the approach to the story because when you think about some of the other versions over the years, this one just really sort of has that same quality as the book of this sort of
yeah,
very weird, imaginative, sort of dreamlike sort of kind of, wild, surreal quality to it that I think that you
Yes.
get when you read the original text.
Yeah.
This film really captures that well, whereas some of the other kind of film versions I've seen in the past are, take sort of slightly different approach to it.
Yeah.
I think, and kind
Well,
of almost water it down in a way.
yeah, I only really watched the Disney one quite recently. I did enjoy it,
Yeah.
but
No,
it's a very
it's a good film. It's an enjoyable film, but it is very stylistically completely diametrically opposed to
yeah.
what we're seeing here.
It's squeaky clean, you could say.
Yeah.
I mean, and this one, yeah, you say this patina, this sort of the material. I don't know where he got it from. It almost as if he'd been trawling the sort of antique shops of
Mm.
Prague, maybe, to find all this sort of clutter, which he
Yeah.
could use for his films. Oh, for the film, it's yeah, it's really cool. Like, the one thing I saw, I actually came across it on Wikipedia of all places, but he said that what he wanted to do is that the film that the story has often been has been interpreted as a fairy tale, but Lewis Carroll, he thought, had written it like a dream, which is what he wanted to do.
Mm.
He wanted to bring out the dreams side of it. Whereas fairy tales, he says, are sort of educational, and there's a sort of moral to them, sort of good overcoming evil and stuff
Mm.
like that. Dream, because it comes from our unconscious, um, is a different beast altogether, and it's not rational and it's not moral, and so that's what Alice is all about, basically, the sort of weirdness of our sort of
Yeah, I mean this little girl is she's quite interesting because she isn't all squeaky clean and sort of sweet with perfect teeth and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
yeah,
and she does sometimes throughout the film just she displays a little bit of mean spiritedness and a little bit of sort of
yeah,
aggression and so those things it's a little bit more of a realistic portrayal of a person rather than this sort of idealized
mm,
version of one, which again I think makes it really interesting and makes it a little bit more sort of intelligent, if you will, over some of the other adaptations. And
yeah,
I think too, I like the framing of the story because it very much frames it that it's a dream. She basically
yes,
she at the beginning they kind of show her as this kind of bored little girl who's basically, I guess, bored and ignored because she's not really getting any engagement from
no,
the adults around her, and we don't even really see them except just in
no,
kind of almost in like sort of a peanut style sort of adults where they're just sort of these kind of figures that are just there, but you don't see their faces and stuff. You just kind of see their bodies,
yeah,
and they're a bit malevolent as well. Like at one point, she's obviously bored and she's throwing stones into a stream, and then she just tries to look at the book that her mother's reading, and
yeah,
she slaps her hand and just sort of kind of rebuffs her,
yeah,
and then they just show her in this room all by herself, obviously just with no one to talk to, just sort of trying to find ways to amuse herself,
mm,
and then it segues into with the story with the rabbit and her following this rabbit on this adventure.
yes,
So the film very much frames it as a dream that maybe she fell asleep or she's just imagining things to kind of
yeah,
amuse herself. So,
yeah,
and just like any child would, I mean, I know that that's what I did when I was a kid, and sometimes I
yeah,
probably still do it. And sometimes you're just
same
sitting there and
really,
you're just thinking of
yeah,
things and you're imagining
yeah,
them and you're thinking, oh, what if this happened? And oh,
yeah,
look at that, what if this happened? And that's very much like the way children's minds kind of operate. And
mm,
so that's why I think this film is cool like that, because it kind of really gets down on that level and sort of you
yeah,
really see the world through her eyes and through
yes,
her imagination. So it's cool.
yeah. One of the things I wrote down, I said Alice is both the protagonist and the narrator. So
Mm,
it's almost as if she's the protagonist, she's the heroine of the story, but she's being the narrator, she's a sort of observer of it. And
mm,
that's one of the things you get with dreams, isn't it? You're sort of somehow in it, but you're also just watching it like it's a movie, and you're not really part of it. And yeah, that's one of the sort of qualities that the film, I think, captures very well. Yeah, there's a crocodile, skeleton crocodile called Bill, which I
Yes.
thought was very strange, but yeah, really incredibly inventive. I guess that's one of the things, isn't it? And the other thing I was thinking actually that it does stick to the story to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So you have, yeah, it's growing and shrinking, like in proper Alice does, and the sort of Mad Hatter's Tea Party. Also has the uh, caterpillar smoking the hookah, except rather than sitting on a mushroom, he's sitting on a sort of darning mushroom, like one of those wooden things that you darn socks with.
Yeah, and the whole thing with the socks, that whole sequence with the socks popping up and down up out of the floor and stuff
Yes,
is quite amazing. And
yes,
yeah,
that's very
there's loads of. And what did you make of the sort of device of because all through the film, whenever any like the entire film is narrated by the little girl,
yeah,
and when one of the other characters speaks, it's
yeah,
through her voice. So she says, so she'll
that's
say,
it.
"Oh my goodness, I'm going to be late."
Yeah,
And then it cuts to this close up of her mouth. And
yes,
she just says, "Said the rabbit." And then it
yes,
cuts to the next bit. So there's
yes,
this device that's used all the way through it
yeah,
of these close ups of her mouth, sort of
yeah,
saying, "Said the queen," and,
yes,
thought Alice. And
yeah,
so it really kind of grounds it as like a sort of a like a story, but it's
yeah,
all through her voice and her imagination, which I think is
yes.
interesting. So what did you make of that?
Yeah, well, that's. I think that's the thing I was thinking of with her being the protagonist and the narrator,
Yeah,
sort of, but that it's all sort of in her head in a way.
yeah,
She's telling us this story, and it's all it makes it much more dreamlike, I guess, in a
yeah.
way, because she's
And is she a reliable
well,
witness? If you know,
yeah, yeah,
because anyone who's telling a story, obviously about something that's happened to them,
yeah,
they're prone to perhaps elaborate or put themselves in a better light,
yeah,
or whatever, or remember things in a different way each
yeah,
time they tell it.
yeah, yeah,
So that kind of adds that dimension to it as well of somebody telling you a story, but it's a little girl, a little bored little girl who's using her imagination and looking at the things around in her room and going, "Oh, and then he did this, and then
yeah,
then this happened, and then
yeah,
I opened that drawer and there was a big pair of scissors in there, and then I
yeah,
did this." So it has very much that quality of like you're getting inside of her head and
yeah,
sort of seeing it all through her sort
yeah,
of thing, which I think is really interesting.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And one thing about that too, I just mentioned too, because I mentioned that on the second viewing, I watched it with the English
Oh
dub
yes,
soundtrack,
yeah,
and that adds another sort of element of kind of distancing yourself from the narrator in a sense, because in the English version, obviously the
yeah,
words don't always match her lips, so
right,
you have that extra added dimension of her lips moving, but what she's saying doesn't quite
right,
match, or kind of slightly out of sync with what the way her mouth is moving, like in
right.
any foreign film that's been dubbed into English. But in
Yes,
this case, because of that device of
yeah,
showing her mouth close up as a
yeah,
narrator, because the English is out of sync with the lips, it adds yet another kind of dreamlike sort of feeling to the proceedings as well. That I think
yes,
has kind of made it kind of interesting as well.
yes. That's interesting. Yeah, I guess uh, dubbing is sort of can be tricky. And it can be a source of amusement. Here, it's a sort of it works as a sounds like it works as a sort of extra artistic
Yeah,
device in a way.
yeah, exactly. If someone saw this and they didn't realize it was a Czechoslovakian film,
Yeah,
they may well just think that that was an aesthetic choice
yeah,
rather than a a
Yeah.
practical consideration. So
Godardian or something.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, but it is interesting that they didn't choose to, because they could have, I guess, theoretically got a close up of a little girl's mouth speaking the words, and they could have cut that in,
Yeah.
to make it match, but they didn't.
Yeah.
So, but I think it actually, in a strange sort of way, adds to the quality of the film when you're watching the English version.
Sounds like it. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool. I like that.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, any other sort of passing thoughts on Alice?
No, but I yeah really enjoyed it. And yeah, I wondered, did you see the Cheshire Cat? Was the Cheshire Cat in there?
Well, not in the traditional sense, because you always see the Cheshire Cat with the big grin and there's
Yeah,
sort of like a. I think the people have an expectation of that, but I
yeah,
think in this there is you don't get that,
no,
but you do instead get perhaps a different representation of it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think one thing I found that about a quote from Jan Švankmajer, that he described Alice's Adventures in Wonderland as one of the most important and amazing books produced by this civilization, which is very, very high praise indeed. So,
It
yeah,
is. It is indeed. Yeah. And I mean, it's the kind of thing. I don't think you can argue with it. I mean,
yeah,
even if you don't necessarily agree with it, it's clearly a very monumental sort of
yeah,
part of our culture
yeah,
as a story, and its influence and its impact.
yeah.
So I certainly don't think you could argue that point.
No, no, I think it's
So because it is quite an extraordinary thing,
yeah,
and this is quite an extraordinary film.
it is.
So how did you watch it? You watched it on.
I watched it on YouTube actually
Oh,
for
did you? Okay.
free. Yeah.
Oh
So
my
it's on
goodness.
there for free, but not because normally they're very good at patrolling and sort of, you know, keeping off films that shouldn't be there for
Hmm.
free. But somehow it was up there for free, and they hadn't taken it down, so presumably it's legal. And then when I watched the Jabberwocky, that was also free on YouTube, although I have it on the DVD box set.
Hmm.
And it just meant I didn't have to go to the cupboard get it out. I just
That's
stay
what
on the
it's coming
sofa.
to, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Easier just to stay in my chair.
basically, and
Uh,
but the that was actually on Jan Svankmeyer's channel on YouTube.
oh, okay. He has a
Yeah,
YouTube channel.
he does.
Okay,
Yeah, which was
brilliant.
pretty cool.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll put a link to that in the show notes, and people after they've looked at our YouTube channel, they can look at his. That's cool.
Absolutely.
I'll just show I don't know, Jono, because I can't see myself today because of the position of the camera, so I don't know
Yeah,
if you can see that, but
yeah, I can see it. Yeah,
this is the BFI
yeah,
Blu-ray. I'm forever promoting BFI product, but I want to assure the listeners that we're in no way sponsored or receiving any sort of kickbacks. Although we wouldn't say no, BFI people, if you wanted to send me a check, but or some free Blu-rays. But this here is their Blu-ray edition, and I'm pretty sure too. Although I didn't verify it before we came to record, but I'm pretty sure that Alice is in the Criterion collection as well. So I think there may
okay,
be a DVD or Blu-ray in the United
okay,
States. And I also think this is a good time to mention
yeah,
that after much procrastination, I've finally gotten around to setting us up on Letterboxd.
ah,
And
yes,
I want to encourage everyone to go and find us on Letterboxd. We're under Film Swap, the podcast. So
yeah,
if you look for our profile there, you will find that we've now got a little summarized, concise reviews
yeah,
of all the films that we've covered on the show, as well as little themed lists based around each of our episodes. And I'll also include links and things in our show notes so you can visit us there. And we also have like an essential film list, which is any of the films that we've talked about on the show that
Yeah.
we think are absolutely must-sees that you have to see before you die, because otherwise you've lived a pointless and meaningless life. So you need to check out every one of the films on that list. It's called the Film Swap Essential Cinema List.
Yeah.
And we'll be adding to that after each episode. We will nominate one or possibly both of the films that we talk
Yeah.
about on the show and put them in that list so that you can consult that use that as your watch list. I quite often have friends who ask me, because they know I'm into films and things,
Yeah.
and they'll often ask me, "Oh, so what film should I watch? What films would you recommend?" So go to our Letterboxd profile, and it's all there. You can look at our essential film list,
Yeah.
and I've put little potted reviews and also little notes for each film that we
Yeah.
talk about. So please, by all means, and when you go there, when you look at the reviews for the films, there is a little thing there that tells you about where you can view the film, because we usually mention how we saw the film and where you can find it. But I think going forward, we'll just refer you to our letterbox, because it will be up to date. Because depending on when you listen to us, if you
Yeah.
listen to this episode like 3 years from now, the situation may be different. So if you look at our review of Alice on our letterbox page,
Yeah.
you'll be able to see what the current availability is on streaming and whatever else, because they've done that homework for us. So we're going to refer you to that from now on. So by all means, come follow us on Letterboxd. Come in and also let us know what you think. If you see our theme tonight is great adaptations, so let us know what films that you think would fit in with our double feature, a film, a really great adaptation of a classic piece of literature that you think you would recommend to people and you want people to know about. Drop us a line, make a comment, send let us know what you're thinking, and we'll share it with our listeners as well.
Please.
So let's all watch cool films and talk about it. So on that note, I think, Jonathan, unless you had anything else you wanted to say about Alice, I think we're going to move
No, I
on.
think that's pretty much most of it.
Yeah, and by all means, I mean, let's not talk anymore. Go and watch it. Go and watch it, folks.
Absolutely.
I was trying to think of ways that, aside from the overall theme, about ways that we could tie Alice in with the leopard thematically.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking too, because if you wanted to look at Alice as a sort of an interpretation of a young girl who's getting older and experiencing that transitional phase between childhood and adulthood,
Yeah.
you could put that interpretation onto the film, couldn't you?
You definitely could. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought maybe in a way that kind of ties in thematically with our next film, The Leopard, which is also about change, isn't it? It's about a time of transition,
It is.
and how people relate and deal with those issues.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a very, 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 very brief intermission,
Yeah.
which time we can go away and collect ourselves and freshen up our beverages. And for the listener, it will only be a few seconds. And you can listen very closely, because you'll hear some details about our social media channels,
Yeah.
which we very much encourage you to come and find us there. And then we'll be back to talk about our second great adaptation, Visconti's The Leopard.
Thanks for listening to the Film Swap podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider giving the show a rating or leaving a review. This helps other listeners find the show. You can follow the Film Swap on social media. We're on Twitter and TikTok at Film Swap UK, on Instagram at Film Swap Media, and on YouTube at Film Swap_podcast, and at Facebook at Film Swap the podcast.
And we're back. Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back, Jonathan.
Hi.
It's time for our second half of our great adaptations double bill. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague here to discuss
Yes.
The Leopard.
The Leopard, Il Gatto Pardo. And so this is, directed by, what's his name again?
Luchino Visconti.
Luchino, that's it. Luchino, yeah. So he's one of the sort of great post-war Italian directors. And so he sort of, his style changed over time. So he started off doing he made the first Italian neorealist film, but then his films became more sort of widescreen, bigger, less neorealist, and more sumptuous, you might say. Not sure what the style of the films are, but they're big Technicolor sort of monsters, basically. But I mean,
costume dramas and
dramas,
big, bold, epic, sweeping
epics is what he started making, exactly. And so this one, I think his first film was in 1943, made during the war, and this one's from 1963, so a couple of decades later. And it stars Burt Lancaster is basically the main guy in it, the hero, who is the Leopard, and the Leopard is basically an Italian aristocrat, Don Fabrizio Corbera, who's a Sicilian prince, but he's a sort of like he's more of a aristocrat than a prince, from what I can gather. And the other two main characters, his nephew, Tancredi, who is played by the great Alain Delon, who died last summer, and Claudia Cardinale is his, maybe his goddaughter, but certainly turns out to be the sort of basically the love interest of Alain Delon. And so those are two very attractive actors, and Ella and Claudia, and they make a great couple. And Burt Lancaster brings this enormous gravity to his role of this prince. And so it's all set in the novel that it's based on, was written by a chap called Giuseppe Tomasi de Lampedusa. And he was also an Italian aristocrat and it's set actually in Sicily, and during the 1860s, I guess, or I think about the 1860s, during the Risorgimento, which is when Italy was being reunited or united, going from being a number of different sort of countries into being one super country, Italy. The prince is one of the sort of, he's part of the sort of old guard in the south, and he can the future that is coming is basically the country his country which he lives in, sort of the Sicily and Naples, the kingdom of Sicily and Naples is going to be sort of abolished, and it's going to become part of Italy, and possibly his sort of title will go. Certainly, his sort of power will be diminished, and this sort of the change is led by Garibaldi, and so he's sort of wondering how I deal with this change. Is he going to fight it? You sort of wonder at the beginning, but no, he decides he's going to embrace the change. And and in fact, he sort of embraces it, but from a distance. He doesn't really do much.
It's more like resignation, isn't it? Than
exactly resignation. His son, his nephew, because he doesn't have a son. He has daughters, but his nephew actually does embrace it. He goes off to join Garibaldi and Garibaldi's army and fight against his own sort of country, in a way, fight against Sicily and Naples.
It should be pointed out, though, that it's quite an opportunistic sort of joining, isn't it? He waits till the army's already basically there, and it's the kind of the writings on the wall about
Yeah.
what's going to happen, and then he's kind of like, oh, I'm going to go and join them, so I can, get in on this action because I could see what's going to happen. So there
Yeah.
is a little bit of opportunism involved in his choice to join that side when he does, right at
Yes.
the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess Alain Delon's a bit more of or Tancredi is a bit more of a sort of slippery character in
Mm,
this thing, whereas who we're less keen on generally. He's very charming and handsome,
yes.
but at the same time, we a bit suspicious of his motives. Whereas the
Well, yeah. Well, his motivation just seems to be kind of getting ahead, or sort of seeing what's where there's an opportunity to move ahead and
yeah,
exploit that. But he
yeah,
doesn't have any real convictions. He doesn't join the fighting because he has a real conviction for what they stand for and what they're
no,
trying to do. It's just more like, this is happening. I'm getting on board. I'm going to hitch my wagon to this
yeah,
star because this is where the way the wind's blowing.
exactly. And
Yeah.
there's this famous line in it, which is something along the lines of, "For everything to stay the same, everything has to change." And Tancredi is the guy who sort of basically embodies this. It's actually the Burt Lancaster's character that says it. In fact, I think it's said twice in the film, but he doesn't really sort of embody it in the same way as Tancredi does, because Tancredi's the one who's sort of really, yeah, getting involved with the army and trying to sort of become a senator or something like that. But yeah, his uncle is sort of just resigned to it, and but I guess the one thing that he does do is he assents for his nephew to be married to Claudia Cardinale's character, who is not an aristocrat. Basically,
Mm.
she's the daughter of a sort of new man, you might say, so a bit local businessman, but very very wealthy guy. And so that's that. I guess that's his sort of way of embracing this change
Mm.
that's coming to
And it's
Italy.
quite a controversial sort of decision because there are a lot of people in the community who don't approve because they
Yes,
don't feel that she's an appropriate match, and
exactly.
that by allowing the marriage to take place, that it will fundamentally change the dynamics of their traditional sort of
Yes,
power structures and things within the community.
that's definitely that's one of the things, and also that she's because they're all very restrained and sort of aristocratic in manner, and she's slightly sort of gauche, you might say.
Yes. Yeah, she's a bit more sort of down to earth, shall we say, a little bit
Down to
more.
earth. And
Yeah.
as in the interview in the BFI video, there's with in the interview with Claudia Cardinale, when they talk about basically early on when you first meet her, there's this sort of banquet or dinner. Actually, it's not a banquet; it's just a dinner. But there's a number of the family there, and the sort of the chit chat is broken by Claudia Cardinale's character laughing,
Yes. Yeah.
and everybody sort of stops and goes, "Oh my gosh, what a horrible laugh!" Basically,
Yeah.
and
Well, and it's partly to do with the story because his nephew's telling a bit of a ribald story about his exploits during the fighting.
yes,
And he makes what is actually quite a little bit of a rude joke,
yeah,
which she then bursts out laughing
yes.
over.
And as Claudia Cardinale describes it in the interview, she says it's vulgar. And
Yes.
I guess that's the thing that's sort of her compared to these very I don't know whatever that you know
Very conservative and a little bit of sort of uptight and old fashioned,
extremely
and
uptight. Yeah,
minding their p's and q's all the time, all
exactly.
these social sort of graces and pomp and circumstance that they all have to follow,
Yeah.
and that they live there, these sort of codes that they all live by, and
Yeah.
she doesn't quite fit that mold.
He very much
She's a
doesn't.
little bit sort of a fish out of water in that sort of environment.
Very much she is.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, but I mean, part of the things that she gets by, I guess, she's welcomed in partly because her father's fabulously wealthy, and partly because she is extremely beautiful.
Mm.
And those two things sort of get her in, basically. But yeah, it's a terrific looking film. I mean, absolutely amazing. And this is what one of the I watched a little bit of it with I'm not sure it had sort of subtitles from the what do you call it when they talk about the film over it. Uh,
The commentary.
Commentary, thank you. So I watched the sort of, you can either listen to it or you can watch the commentary as subtitles, which was really interesting. I didn't watch the whole thing again with the commentary subtitles, but at the beginning there's this. It sort of starts. They're all praying in this room, and the whoever's doing the commentary is explaining how they shot it. I'd assumed somehow they'd shot it on location, but they hadn't. It was all done in the studio with these lights, but that created this extraordinary sort of shimmering evening light. But it's just it completely drew me into it, and but that's just the beginning, and then it finishes off with this ball that goes on for about 45 minutes because the
Yeah.
film's quite long. It's 3 hours and 5 minutes long,
Yeah.
and the ball at the end is just amazing, absolutely amazing. It looks stunning. It's huge, great sort of space with all these extraordinary sort of silk dresses, and the women in their ringlets, and yeah, it really does look amazing. And the Italian, the Sicilian landscapes incredible,
Yeah.
and yeah, of course, Burt Lancaster's just what an actor, what an actor.
Yeah, he's one of the greats. And even here, where if you watch the Italian, the sort of the full length Italian version of the film, he's been
Yeah.
dubbed over with an Italian actor's voice.
Okay.
But even so, he still, has this commanding presence and this sort of
Yeah.
this real sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of a dignity and he
Dignity.
just he just has that
Yeah.
this sort of aura about him that really brings that character. You really get to understand the way he feels and his his perspective on how things are changing and how
Yeah.
there's a certain he's resigned to it and he's saddened by it, but at
Yeah.
the same time he's partly kind of he works with us as an observer to these changes,
Yeah.
doesn't he? So he's sort of
Yes.
like your perspective on seeing how these things developed
Yeah.
and how this sort of old style of these power structures within this community are changing gradually.
Hmm.
And it's even represented by by the buildings, all these grand old buildings and
Extraordinary.
churches
Yeah.
and these huge sort of kind of palatial palaces that these people live in.
Yeah.
But at times you can see the decay in them. Like you go in and they go. There's
Yeah.
this great scene where I guess Alain Delon and his soon-to-be wife, his fiance, come to look at a house that I guess they're going to take possession of,
Yeah.
and they're going and just searching through the rooms, and it's this old, huge, massive piece of property
Yeah.
with very ornate sort of carvings in the wall, and this great piece of architecture, but it's all kind of crumbling, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's all old and a bit dilapidated, and
Yeah.
sort of no one's lived there. He even says that no one's actually ever lived here. So they
Yeah.
built this whole great big huge, building, huge rooms and great big libraries and giant sort of spaces, dining areas, and it's just sitting abandoned. They built it and nobody even lived in it.
Yeah,
It's all
yeah,
just sort of falling apart, dusty, and there's paintings on the wall that have kind of bullet holes in them,
yes.
uh, presumably from when the soldiers came, and
Mm, Or
so
maybe when they were young, they were sort of taking pot shots at them. I don't know.
yeah. So
Yeah,
there's these sort of magnificent works of art, but they've all been compromised
yeah,
in some way. So that's I found was quite interesting, as well as the film progressed. That sort of grandeur is sort of morphing and changing.
yeah,
That's quite interesting.
yeah. Yeah, well, it's extraordinary. And I also, because I read the book actually.
Oh, really?
Um, so the book came out only in, I mean, it's came out only in 1958, so sort of 5 years before the film was released, just after the author had died.
Mm,
He was a heavy smoker, and he sort of died, I think, of something smoking related disease anyway. And but although originally he hadn't managed to get a publishing deal, but it was one of those ones that sort of after he died became a sort of success, and it's considered the best Italian novel of the 20th century,
mm,
by some at least. And so it's unlike, I guess, lots of classic novels. Um, it's not actually written during the 19th century, but it is set in the 19th century. So it could, like all the same period of so many British sort of classic novels. But yeah, one of the things about the book is that it's not really so much what happens. It's the sort of interior life of the
mm.
prince himself, and it's just a very human portrayal of this man. Really, he's and Burt Lancaster, he does him great justice. He's a very dignified, sort of not exactly cynical, but sort of wise to the world. And
Yeah,
he's one. I mean, in the film, he's one of the oldest characters, isn't he? There's
he
his
is
wife,
indeed. Yeah.
but all the other people are sort of young and sort of daft.
Yes, a little bit. Yeah, there's that great scene in the ballroom when he at one point he observes all these girls, young girls, all
Yeah,
chattering, and he
yeah,
sort of makes this comment like, all these years of people marrying their cousins, and
yes,
this is what it's come to, and they're all climbing the walls like monkeys,
yes, yes,
and it's that's quite a funny moment because the film is actually quite. It has a quite. It is kind of. Has a little bit of like a humorous quality to it. I wouldn't outright say it's a comedy, but it
no,
has very the observational elements of the film. Quite often,
yeah,
the film has a lot of humor that runs through it, a lot of sort of sarcastic comments, and a lot of
mm,
little sort of acute observations about
yeah,
characters and situations that actually and little great bits of dialogue that actually the film is very funny at times. Like there's very amusing
yeah,
moments in it.
yeah,
And you mentioned about that interior life of the character, because one of the things that I quite like about the film
yeah,
is that we mentioned that it's very epic. It's grand in
mm,
scale in terms of visually. It's a
yeah,
big, sprawling film and covers a lot of ground historically.
yeah,
And it does have some big battle scenes towards the beginning.
yeah,
But despite this kind of epic sort of quality to it, it also very much has a very personal quality to it,
yeah,
because it is very much, you get the perspective of Burt Lancaster's character, of the prince's character,
mm,
and of like you say, that inner life. You kind of get that sense. Of course, the film has to do it through dialogue and through sort of
yeah,
metaphor and other sort of ways,
yeah,
but you still get that intimate quality to it, despite the trappings of this big sprawling epic,
yes,
widescreen mammoth
yeah.
production. So that's something that I quite enjoy about it.
Yes, it is. It's got that sort of domestic, sort of
Mm,
personal side as well as the sort of historical.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a bit of a film that we talked about a while back, Reds, Warren Beatty's
Oh
Reds,
yeah,
because that's something I quite like about that film as well, because it's a big, huge, sprawling epic,
yeah,
covers a lot of important historical events. It
yeah,
has big, huge sort of scenes of
yeah,
crowds, a cast of thousands and all that.
yeah,
Yet the film has a very sort of intimate portrait of these people, and you really get down in deep into their characters and
yeah,
their psychology and their relationship and their so I think that quite adds a lot of depth to the
yeah.
film that you sometimes don't get from those big huge spectacle films.
No, that's true. That's
So
true.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's really amazing. There's some of the themes I wrote down seem to be like sort of progress versus fate. Was it learned versus practical? Honesty versus opportunism? Big themes, basically, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's not afraid of a sort of large questions.
No, there's a lot of philosophical depth to a lot of the conversations that quite often,
Yeah,
like there's a lovely scene where one of the sort of influential people in the town approaches the prince and asks him if he wants to become a senator, and Burt Lancaster turns him down. He just says, "No, I'm not the person you want because my my outlook and my ideals and my sort of um, views are going to be a bit old fashioned and they're not going to fit
yeah,
in with this new kind of political sort of zeitgeist that's starting to take
yeah,
hold."
yeah,
So I thought that there's a lot of really interesting and insightful dialogue that goes on in
yes,
those conversations
yeah,
that again give the film a lot of depth and make it too quite even sort of quite relevant, I think, today,
mm,
because it kind of maps out how things have changed, have gotten to where they are now in terms of where we've moved away from this sort of different hierarchy to just another. And
yeah,
in some ways, it's kind of the same, but in other ways, it's quite different.
yeah,
And Alain Delon's character is very much that representation of that kind of
mm,
opportunism and that sort of lack of real fundamental values and really believing strongly in things
yeah,
and just sort of going along with whatever's going to get him ahead and
yeah,
whatever's going to progress him for his own position and power and wealth and things
yeah,
like that. So I
yeah.
think that the film has some resonance. I think that's still sort of relevant today,
Mm.
I think.
Well, interesting you say that because I mentioned it to a colleague at work, and they said I haven't seen the film, but I've heard of it, or the film and the book, or read the book either, because there's a Spanish word. This chap was sort of Chilean Spanish. He said there's in the word in Spanish called gatopardismo or gatopardism, and I looked it up. It's an English word as well, a gatopardism without the O. And it basically means sort of making sort of surface changes whilst keeping the sort of everything the same underneath,
Yeah.
which I hadn't heard that phrase, but I mean that's basically the quote I was talking about at the beginning.
Mm.
And yeah, so there's even it's even given rise to a word. Would you believe it?
Well, yeah, and that's a good way of summing it up because at the beginning of the film, there is that sort of uncertainty about what's going to happen, like in because all revolutions in a certain extent, you just see a replacement of one hierarchy and one sort of elite
Hmm.
power just displacing one for another, right? And
Yeah,
that's always how it really works out in the end.
instinct.
And in a way, this film really embodies that sort of idea because at the
Yeah,
beginning, we have this very rich, wealthy, powerful, aristocratic family. And
yeah,
then when there's this upheaval, at first, for all they know, these guys are going to break down the door and string them up, and
yeah,
you know, and that'll be the end of them. but it doesn't work out that way. In a way, they kind of, their family and their wealth and their position still just transitions
Yeah.
to this new regime,
Yeah.
and we have just new people who come in just to replace the hierarchy that was there before.
Yeah.
And we still have the wealthy class who have their positions of influence and power over the communities. I mean,
Yeah.
there's that great bit where Burt Lancaster kind of, he's quite sort of dismissive of the idea that you could actually improve the conditions for sort of the poor or the working class, or and he makes these grand speeches about how, oh, in a way they already think they're perfect, so they don't need improving.
Yeah.
Sort of thing is basically what his sentiment is.
Yeah.
And this is sort of a, you know things haven't really changed. It's just different people, and
Yeah.
perhaps their agendas and their ideas are more, uh, or maybe more selfish or more self-centered, but they are.
Mm.
We still have that same. It's kind of the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's changed, but it's the same.
Yeah. This well on Wiktionary it defines ghettopardism as the creation of political reforms that are only apparent rather than substantial.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite relevant here in the UK as well. Like people, a few, last year they voted in for a new party for change, but they got no change at all, did they?
Yeah.
they, nothing fundamentally has changed. They're just different guys
Mm.
wearing the same suits and enacting the same policies and the same, fundamentally there's been no change, but on the surface, people can feel like they've made a change,
Mm.
but eh, not really.
No. No.
Nothing's changed at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I think this is a really great film. Just
Yeah.
really a sort of a great classic, and such a great cast too. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
I'm a huge Alain Delon fan. I'm like, I love that man.
yeah.
He's just any film, him and Claudia Cardinale.
Cardinale.
Cardinale. Okay. Well, whatever her name is, she's if she's in a film, I
Yeah.
immediately like, yeah, I
Yeah.
want to watch that.
Yeah.
She's one of those names that always comes up any film I'm looking at,
Yeah.
considering watching it. If I see either of their names in the cast list, I immediately go, okay, I'm
Mm.
sold. I want to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
that.
Definitely. Definitely.
And I was quite brokenhearted when Alain Delon passed away recently, because you know um, he's one of the great sort of European film stars.
He
You
was.
know,
Yeah. Well, Claudia Cardinale is still going
yeah, definitely she is. Yeah,
at 87.
amazing,
Yeah. Absolutely.
amazing. But yeah, and they're not the only ones. The whole the film is beautiful, and it's moving, and it's got a lot of intelligence and
Yeah.
power to it, and
Yeah.
I think it's just a really great film. It's definitely worth an evening
Yeah.
watch.
I should
Um,
also say that it's one of Martin Scorsese's favorites.
oh,
Top
well,
five.
there you go. Well, there you go. He's a man of impeccable taste, is Martin Scorsese.
Yes.
I actually, one time, when we were regularly doing our factoids,
Oh,
we
yeah.
did one once where we mentioned, I think we were talking about Yugetsu, which is one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
And I think in the factoid, we mentioned that it was Martin Scorsese was very highly,
Oh, okay.
he's
Yeah.
thinks quite highly of the film as well.
Yeah.
And someone sent us a little disparaging sort of like sarcastic remark like, oh, if Martin Scorsese likes it, then it must be good. Like it was sort of like implying like,
Ridiculous.
we just go with whatever he says. But the
Yeah.
truth is, Martin Scorsese is a man of great taste and talent, and
Yes.
he loves films. Like he lives and breathes films to his very core. And
Absolutely.
I think he's a man of quite good taste.
Absolutely.
who I think there's a reason why people respect his opinion and think that he, if he endorses something, that it's there's some value there because he knows what he's talking about.
He does. Why
Yeah,
anybody would say, "Oh, if he," I mean, that's just a daft comment.
yeah. Well, it was. Well, it's not the only deaf comment
No,
that's
no,
come along, and that's the beauty of social media is
that's true.
that people are free to speak their minds,
Absolutely.
whether they should or not. But we do encourage people to speak their minds. If you
Yeah,
have anything you'd like to say to us about the Leopard or Visconti or Martin Scorsese or Alice or surreal animation, or you'd like to recommend a great adaptation that you would like us to think about or talk
hmm,
about, or even if you've got a theme for a future show that you'd like to recommend to us to say, hey, why don't you do a show about, I don't know, films about shoes or something like that, whatever. Let us know what you're thinking because we'd love to hear from you.
yeah,
We're always happy when people reach out to us.
yeah,
And by all means, check us out on Letterbox now because that's where we're going to list all the films that we've
yeah.
talked about on the show and let you know what we think about them. And we'd love to hear your comments as well. Uh, and also, the old algae rhythms are always something. They're like a great mountain that we got to climb up. So, if you like the show, and we very much appreciate you joining us and coming and listening to us, and by all means, tell your friends, tell your casual acquaintances, tell
Yeah.
the guy standing next to you at the bus stop. But
Mhm.
share Film Swap with the world. Let people know about us so that we can keep talking about great films.
Absolutely.
Um,
Please.
yeah, Jonathan, anything else you wanted to say? Last closing words on the Leopard?
Well, this time I'm going to tell you about my DVD. So
Oh,
I have this DVD of The
oh,
Leopard,
great.
which
Blu-ray.
is,
It's a Blu-ray.
sorry, Blu-ray.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
there's
Blu-ray.
mine. I've gotten the same
Oh,
one.
identical one, yeah.
Yes.
So this, I saw it at the cinema when it was re-released in sort of around 25 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
And then this, perhaps it was, well, I don't know when exactly it was, 2005 maybe. And then this, I think, came out in 2009, the
Hmm.
Blu-ray a little bit later. And I would say I mean, it looks beautiful, but in terms of extras, not a lot.
No, it's a little bit bare bones.
Bit bare bones, but
And
that's all right.
I would say to people that if they have a multi-region Blu-ray player, and I would always recommend that you do that.
Yeah.
But the U.S. Criterion edition of the Leopard is better. I don't have it myself. I just opted for the cheaper option and got
Yep.
the domestic release.
Yep.
But in the US, the Criterion edition actually has an alternate version of the film because the
Is it?
version that's on the BFI Blu-ray is just the full-length Italian version of the Leopard, which is 185 minutes. But there is the American cut, which is about sort of 20 minutes shorter and has
Okay.
Burt Lancaster speaking in his own voice. Basically, you don't
Really?
get the dubbed Burt Lancaster; you get
Okay.
actual Burt Lancaster speaking. Um, so if people like me, if you're like a keen collector like I am, I like sort of alternate cuts and different versions and all that sort of minutiae of variants of
Yeah.
famous films and stuff. So that I would
Interesting.
recommend if you're going to buy a
Hmm.
physical copy, I would plump for the um, US Blu-ray version of the film because
Definitely.
it is a better edition than the BFI one.
Yeah.
Sorry, BFI guys, but by all means, still send me those free discs that you were going to send me.
Absolutely. And the other thing I was going to tell you about is the book, which I have
Oh,
right here.
look at that! That's beautiful.
So this one is a second-hand copy. Actually, you're talking about returning books to the library. This one
is
I
a
bought
library
second-hand.
copy.
It's an ex-library copy.
Yeah, I was just joking around at the beginning, but see, there's something to this, isn't there, Jonathan? You're sitting on a stockpile of old library
Well,
books, aren't you?
this one was I bought it in a second-hand bookshop, but it was or stall or something. Last taken out in 1998.
Oh, wow.
And then, funnily enough, inside this got this little thing here. I found my ticket from when I went to watch it. I kept the stub. So I went to watch it on the 16th of May, 2003.
Oh,
So,
wow. And where was that, down at the NFT?
no, the Curzon Mayfair.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
about that.
That's amazing. Oh, I can't really read that. It's all sort of blocky.
It's very faded ticket, has to be said.
Oh,
Anyway,
well, that's amazing. Well,
yeah.
I envy you because I've never seen the Leopard on the big screen, and I'm sure that would be lovely to see it.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
And I've never read the book either. I mean, it's one of those things that I've always like, oh, I'd quite fancy reading that, but there's also like about 1,000 other books that I'd like to read, and it's just there's only so many hours in the day, so many hours to watch films and
That's true.
do other things, especially when you got a family and you do a podcast and all sorts of other things. So, yeah, unfortunately, sitting down and reading The Leopard, I'd love to, maybe one day.
Long journey, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But we'll see. But anyway, that's great. That's brilliant. So, folks, thanks for joining us again. And by all means, come and find us on Letterboxd, Film Swap, the podcast. And you can also find us on all the other, Facebook and Twitter or whatever they call it nowadays. But we'd always love to hear from people who want to talk about films. And by all means, reach out to us because we're there. And we'll continue to post updates about what we're up to and things. And on that note, now would be probably a really great time for you to follow or subscribe to the show, because in our future episodes, we've got lots of really interesting themes and lots of really interesting guests coming up. And we'll also hopefully have some of our old friends back as well that we've spoken to in the past to get them back on to do another swap with us. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Jonathan,
thank you very much.
Nice to talk to you as always a pleasure. And videos too. I think you may find that the factoid may be making a bit of a comeback in the near future. We haven't quite just worked out in what shape and what form that's going to be, but I suspect that the Film Swap factoid will be back with a vengeance. In the future. So stay tuned and watch out for that. All right, folks. Well, we'll take care until next time. We'll see you soon.
Bye. Hey, film nerds. Film Swap is now on Letterboxd. It's where you'll find capsule reviews for every film we've covered on the show, plus themed lists based on each of our episodes, and our essential cinema list featuring the films we think are absolute must-sees. You can explore the themes and dive deeper and even drop your own swaps and suggestions in the comments. Got a perfect pick for one of our themes? Tell us. Follow Film Swap on Letterboxd, hit us with your hot takes and submit your swaps. It's like Criterion Closet, except only more chaotic. Just look for Film Swap Podcast on Letterboxd or use this handy-dandy QR code. There's also a link in the comments. Hidden gems, forgotten classics. Follow Film Swap on Letterboxd and let's get nerdy.
Oh, the things these nerdy middle-aged men get up to.